You take a giant straw and begin to inflate Saturn. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's enough. Now let's add some giant rings. That's it. This is Super Saturn, also called Saturn on steroids. It's a real object that scientists discovered in 2012, a planet named J1407b. And astronomers are still not sure what it really is. It could be a gas giant, like Jupiter or Saturn in our solar system. Then there would be no solid surface there. And if you wanted to set foot on that planet, you just fall through it, all the way to the core. But it could also be a brown dwarf. That's something between a large planet and a full-fledged star. Such objects have to be heavy enough to start thermonuclear reactions, like those going on inside stars. But the power of these reactions is too weak for brown dwarfs to glow and emit heat. To imagine the size and weight of J1407b, let's look at our Earth. If you put our planet on a scale, it'll show 6 and another 21 zeros tons. Our planet is also about 7,900 miles across. Now, that's Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system. Its diameter is 11 times as great as that of Earth. It's also 318 times heavier. If Jupiter were a bucket, you could put 1,321 Earths in it. And this is the hero of the day, Super Saturn. It's almost 20 times as large as Jupiter. To balance the scales, you need to put 6,360 Earths on the other side. The planet's rings are so wide that if they were in the solar system, they would take up more than half the space between the Sun and Earth. And if Super Saturn switched places with the original Saturn, you'd see those rings with the unaided eye. They would be larger than a full moon. Presumably, these rings appeared in the same way as the ones around our Saturn. One theory says they're the remains of a moon that was once there. Its orbit was unstable, and over time, the moon got torn apart by the tidal forces of the huge planet it orbited. Small pieces of the former moon took their places in the giant's orbit. They collided with one another, like in a blender. After some time, everything that was left was basically particles of dust and ice moving around the colossal planet. Another theory suggests that the rings appeared after the moon collided with an asteroid or another moon. Then the gravitational blender did its job and turned the moon's debris into the rings. Some scientists think the rings formed at around the same time as the planet itself. So they're just the remains of the planetary nebula, which is a cloud of gas, space debris, and dust. Later, it probably shrunk and solidified to form a planet. We can only guess where Super Saturn got its rings from, but scientists say their mass is 80% of that of Earth. It may mean that the moon that used to orbit J1407b was about the same size as our planet. There's a little gap in the middle of these rings. Scientists think Super Saturn's moon might be there. If this is the case, it should be about the size of Mars. If scientists are right and Super Saturn is actually a brown dwarf, then this is an incredible discovery. Scientists will be able to watch it age. Supposedly, brown dwarfs lose their energy and shrink, fading in the process. And when a brown dwarf exhausts all its energy, it turns into a black dwarf. It's easy to confuse it with a black hole. People haven't discovered black dwarfs anywhere in the universe yet, because they take trillions and quadrillions of years to form. Our universe is too young, and none of the stars, even those that appeared when the universe was born, have had time to become black dwarfs. One of the oldest objects in the universe is the white dwarf, with a pretty long name, WD 0346 plus 246. It's about 11 to 12 billion years old and half as cold as our sun, and it's still cooling. It would need around 10 plus another 15 zeros years to turn into a black dwarf. For comparison, the universe is 1.4 and 10 zeros years old. Scientists believe that a black dwarf will exist for about 10 plus 25 zeros years, feeding on dark matter. After that, its protons, the smallest particles of matter, will begin to decay. And then, the black dwarf will simply evaporate. That will take another 10 plus 49 zeros years. But if the protons remain intact, a much more interesting scenario will await the black dwarf. In another 10 and 1500 zeros years, the black dwarf will become an iron star. It's essentially just a cannonball in space. The iron sphere will exist billions of times longer than our entire universe has existed, until it suddenly turns into a black hole. So, the process of the formation of a black dwarf is extremely long. It'd take a regular star an insane amount of time to age that much. But Super Saturn, if it is a brown dwarf, may be much closer to this state. Saturn on steroids is not the only strange planet in our universe. This is Gliese 436b. It's been detected using the transit method. A transit happens when a planet moves between its host star and an observer. It looks similar to a lunar eclipse. This planet is 4 times the size of Earth and 22 times as heavy. That's almost like Neptune. It's an exotic water world. The water there is solid, but it's not ice. It has a temperature of about 520 degrees Fahrenheit. The water in your pot turns into steam at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. But on Gliese 436b, the liquid remains solid because of the extreme pressure on the planet. Scientists have also discovered that the planet's atmosphere is evaporating into outer space. That's why there's a giant circular cloud around it. It's constantly moving in its orbit, giving the planet a long tail that looks like that of a comet. Cancri E holds incredible riches worth more than all the money on Earth. There are diamonds scattered all over the planet. Cancri E is about twice as wide and 8 times as heavy as Earth. This planet doesn't rotate. Only one of its sides always faces its host star. The surface temperature there is almost twice as high as the temperature of a burning fire. And since the host star is rich in carbon, the planet contains plenty of this element too. The intense pressure and temperatures help turn carbon into graphite and diamonds. Unfortunately, this planet is 40 light years away from our home, so it'd take about 730,000 years to get there on a regular rocket. Another planet rich in gems is HAT P7b. It's about 1,000 light years away from Earth. It's 60% as large and nearly twice as heavy as Jupiter. The planet is so close to its host star that it makes one revolution around it in just 2 Earth days. Because of such close proximity to the star, HAT P7b is almost as hot as a white dwarf. If you look at the night side of this planet, you'll see unusual clouds. Scientists believe that these clouds may be rich in corundum material. This is the very substance that forms rubies and sapphires, so it's likely to rain very expensive and beautiful gems there. WASP 12b is one of the darkest planets ever discovered. Only one of its sides faces its host star. The planet's surface is so dark that it eats up about 94% of all visible light, so it looks a lot like a black hole. The host star heats up the planet so much that the material there continuously evaporates. Then the star's strong gravity pulls this cloud toward itself, forming a disk. But TRES-2b is the champion. It's the darkest planet known to people. It absorbs 99% of the light coming from its star, which means it consumes more light than a piece of coal. 1% of the remaining light looks red as it gets reflected by this gas giant. From afar, this planet looks very evil. One of the oldest planets in the universe is PSR B1620 26b. It's about 12.7 billion years old. This means that it formed about 1 billion years after the Big Bang. The planet is so old that its 2 host stars have had time to evolve. One is a white dwarf. The other is a pulsar that makes almost 100 revolutions per second. Sunrises on this planet must be stunning. Right now, this star system is moving toward a dense cluster of stars. This is likely to lead to a stellar collision, so the fate of this planet is unknown. Kepler 438b is one of the most Earth-like planets. It's only 12% larger and is in the habitable zone of its host star. Not too close and not too far away. It's a sweet spot where water doesn't evaporate because of the heat and doesn't turn into ice because of the cold. This planet might host life on its surface. In the future, it may also become a new home for humanity, but it would take people about 470 years to get to this planet, even if we traveled at the speed of light, which is impossible due to the laws of physics.
A huge meteorite enters our atmosphere, causing an explosion of catastrophic proportions. All forms of life on Earth cease to exist. A giant wave of fire wraps around the planet several times until only ash and dust remain of the green landscape.
But then again, there's another option for our planet's future. The sun could swallow it.
Wait. Who is this?
In the course of its evolution, our star will keep expanding
Am I the only one hearing this voice?
until it gets so big that it just swallows our planet without even noticing it.
Hey buddy, that's my video.
I don't think so.
Okay, alright, I'll share it with you. But let's not look that far into the future.
Whatever you say, buddy. How about the fact that the Earth will soon have rings?
Like Saturn?
Almost. Saturn's rings are made of dust and ice.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Thousands of years ago, something really mysterious happened in Saturn's orbit. The planet's gravity tore one of its satellites apart.
Yes, Saturn is a gas giant. It's 95 times heavier than Earth, so it has stronger gravity. It attracted a small moon from its orbit to its surface. Then, it was torn apart from the inside by tidal forces, like the ones between Earth and Moon. Many huge fragments stuck in Saturn's orbit. Some scientists say there was a collision of two moons there. They crashed into each other like billiard balls. As a result, both cosmic bodies turned into a pile of debris and blocks of ice.
No matter how they got there, this debris started circling Saturn. They collided with each other, turning into smaller rocks. It was a kind of cosmic blender. Rocks gradually ground into dust, and huge blocks of ice turned into small crystals. On average, the objects are in the same ratio to these rings as a human fingernail to a school bus.
And soon, similar rings will appear around Earth.
But how? I mean, we have the moon, and it's hard to imagine that it could break apart at any moment. Plus, we don't have another moon to recreate the same collision in our orbit.
Space junk. We have a lot of it. We started launching spacecraft into Earth's orbit in about 1957, and it almost always follows the same scenario.
Ah, yes. The rocket consists of several parts, a booster, or even several of them, the second stage of the rocket, and a cargo, which is contained in a capsule at the end of the rocket. The booster accelerates the rocket to almost orbit and then undocks. The second stage fires up the engines and climbs even higher to get the cargo into orbit. Then the second stage undocks as well, and the cargo capsule releases the satellite or space probe into outer space.
Yes, the first and the second stages of the rocket and the cargo capsule were disposable. That means they stayed in Earth's orbit. Over time, our planet attracted them. They entered the atmosphere and burned up because of friction with the air. But many objects keep orbiting our planet for decades. As of 2021, there are about 170 million space debris objects in our orbit. These are parts of spacecraft, like the bolts used to undock rocket stages. There are also old artificial satellites, operating ones, functioning spacecraft, and debris from collisions that had already happened.
Oh, I've heard about that. In 2009, two satellites collided with each other. Both satellites were destroyed. They shattered into about 600 pieces of different sizes.
Yes, and these sharp metal fragments are flying in orbit at about 6 miles per second. So they could make a trip from New York to London in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's about the same speed at which our rockets fly. And that's about 45 times faster than commercial airplanes.
So these fragments have a lot of energy. As they collide with each other, they shatter and become smaller.
Just like the moon debris around Saturn.
Exactly.
But a bunch of metal debris orbiting faster than the speed of sound can damage our spacecraft, right?
Yes. The International Space Station has already turned on its engines to maneuver once to avoid a collision with a cloud of space debris. Sharp metal parts can damage the hull of the space station or even puncture it. Then the ISS, worth about $150 billion, would be destroyed.
So, if we keep throwing debris into orbit, we could really give our planet the rings.
And then they will be visible even during the day. They will reflect sunlight, just like the moon. And if you look out the window, you'll see beautiful stripes interrupted by the shadow that the Earth casts.
It's an amazing view. Do you want to see an even more unusual one? Imagine that our sun has increased in size by 10 times, and that process is happening right now. Our star is a giant boiler burning hydrogen. It's continually heating up, and every billion years, the sun gets 10% brighter and creates more heat. It'll heat the Earth more, and eventually, the oceans and seas of our planet will begin to evaporate. Thick clouds will completely cover the sky, turning Earth into a giant greenhouse. Our home will look like Venus.
Looks like humanity will no longer be able to live on Earth. What will we do then?
Well, we'll load all the humans and animals into spaceships and move to Mars. At that point, the sun will have warmed it up nicely. Water and carbon dioxide deep in the planet's interior will begin to evaporate and create an atmosphere there. This will cause a greenhouse effect and warm up the planet enough for you to wear shorts there.
And then we'll watch the Earth become a lifeless rock with acid clouds like Venus from the surface of Mars.
Yep, but in about 7 billion years, the Sun will start to expand even more and become a red giant. In this phase, it'll become 256 times wider than it is now. So it will completely swallow Mercury and Venus, and the edge of the star will lie just in the orbit of Earth.
So our planet will just drown in the hot plasma on the Sun's surface?
Maybe. But when a star burns so much fuel, it loses weight, and so the Sun's gravitational field will weaken as well. So it won't keep the planets of the solar system as close to itself anymore. Perhaps our planet's orbit will become wider, and then Earth will become the first planet near the Sun. Some scientists believe that at this time, Saturn's moon Titan may gain conditions suitable to become a new home for humanity. Then the Sun will begin to shed its upper layers. It'll lose mass and gravity dramatically. This will plunge the solar system into chaos.
Some planets will collide with each other. Others may just fly away into the far dark space. It would be a game of cosmic billiards.
Exactly. And the final stage of the Sun's life is a white dwarf. Then our star will become the size of Earth. The planets that survive won't get enough heat from the white dwarf, and its light will gradually fade over billions and trillions of years.
Another challenge that awaits Earth in the distant future has a galactic scale.
The collision of the Milky Way and Andromeda.
Bingo! Right now, the Andromeda Galaxy is moving toward us at 60 miles per second. You could make a trip around the globe at that speed in just 6 minutes.
Yeah, you can already see the stars and gas of Andromeda Galaxy in the night sky with an unaided eye at 2.5 million light-years from Earth.
And in 4 billion years from now, the galaxies will begin the process of merging. No one could be 100% sure about what will happen to the Earth. It could be total chaos when the stars and nebulae of both galaxies collide. Then supernova explosions would go off everywhere. Like fireworks.
But this is extremely unlikely to happen. The concentration of stars and space objects in galaxies is very low. The distances between them are gigantic. It's like if you took a handful of sand and scattered it all over the planet.
The most likely scenario is that by the time the two galaxies do collide, there will be no liquid water on the hot surface of Earth. That would mean the end to all terrestrial life. Scientists believe it can happen in about 3.75 billion years.
You're relaxing in your room and streaming some good tunes when suddenly the network's down. You try rebooting your phone, but there's still no connection. Out of nowhere, your sister barges into your room in panic. She's screaming something about rings. Boxing rings, wedding rings, rings on the tub. She's not making any sense. So she drags you out of the house and shows you the sky. You take a look up and see streaks of objects forming miles above the Earth's surface. Her connection seems to work. The two of you check online what's going on, and everywhere the same thing is making headlines. Rings are suddenly appearing in our sky. Hashtag Earth Rings is breaking the record, and videos are going super viral. Your sister can't help but join the crowd and takes a bunch of selfies with the sky. You run to the TV in your living room to check out the news. Scientists are warning about a coming catastrophe and explaining that everyone should remain indoors. Even though it's a cloudless day in the middle of summer, the weather seems to be getting colder and colder. Suddenly, the signal's cut off. Other channels show nothing either. Then you see your neighbors packing their bags and heading out. Others follow suit. You hesitate a bit, but decide to do the same in the end. Your sister is still outside taking selfies when you urge her to come along with you to seek some answers. The two of you hop in your car and drive out into the city. The rings above seem to be gaining more mass with each second. You and your sister are getting colder and colder. You head to the university to see if anyone knows anything, but there's no one there. Only one parked car in the lot. And it's a good thing you recognize that car. You and your sister rush in and find the astronomy professor doing some quick calculations and trying to figure out why all this is happening. He urges you to take seats and begins explaining. No one knows what this is all about, but it's limiting the sun's exposure on Earth, which explains why it's getting colder by the minute. Why the rings are getting thicker is a mystery too. On Saturn, the rings are made up of ice and rock particles. They can be as small as an ant or the size of a bus. The rocks could be leftover meteor debris or even remnants of dwarf planets. But since Earth is so close to the Sun, ice wouldn't be something you'd find floating above us. With all these rocks piled up, they block the Earth's access to Sun to warm us up and give us light. The professor goes on to explain that Earth will enter a new ice age, and oxygen levels will deplete within a year's time unless those newborn rings disappear anytime soon. This also explains why there's no connection. The rocks that form the rings are hitting and breaking the satellites. Suddenly, you hear a loud ringing noise outside. The three of you head outside and see a helicopter blasting an alarm with a red light flashing. "Everyone to your homes now! This is not a drill! Everyone, head home!" You get in your car with your sister, but the roads are jammed. You have to go on foot, which will take 2 hours. There's no way anyone can remain outdoors. You venture out seeing everyone stuck on the road. They're all arguing with each other and causing chaos. You try not to get caught in the middle of anything and sneak your way to the highway. With the rings getting thicker, less sunlight is breaking through. This ice age info is stuck in your head, chilling you even more. You take a deep breath and see a thin mist coming out of your mouth. The sky is getting darker and you're still not home yet. Your sister is tired and needs to rest, but you urge her to move on. You find an abandoned clothes shop and head inside. The store clerks are actually giving away thick jackets for everyone to wear. You grab a couple and slip them on. Only 1 more hour to get home, but the sky is completely dark. There's no way you and your sister can go out in such conditions, so you decide to camp up in the clothes shop. They set up a mini bonfire in the middle of the shop and create makeshift sleeping bags with the rest of the unused clothes. Luckily, there's enough food to feed everyone, including you and your sister. It's the middle of the night. The fire goes out, and you can't see outside the shop. You head to the window and open it up. A huge pile of snow spills in and wakes everyone up. It's the middle of August, and a snowstorm formed overnight. Everyone is freezing, and they start the fire anew. There's no radio or any way to find out what's happening. The wind picks up and starts shaking the shop. Things start falling off the shelves, but you and everyone else are cozy by the fire. The next day, you look outside and see the entire area covered in snow. You live in a sunny place where it barely rains, and the rings in the outer atmosphere are even bigger than last night. Out of nowhere, a truck filled with people pulls over, and the driver tells you there's a shelter for everyone some miles away. The truck has chains all over the tires and is equipped for the worst snowy conditions. Even though it's morning, the sky is pretty dark. You and everyone else hop in. Abandoned cars, some with their doors still open, are scattered all over. The truck drives around them or just smashes through the ones in the way. It pulls over next to an ambulance and takes all the equipment to help the ones in need. You drive past your neighborhood and see your entire house covered in snow. The large tree in your backyard has fallen under the weight of the snow and broken the roof, allowing snow to flood in. The truck speeds through and gets to the shelter, which, to your surprise, is the mall. You get out and see many of the townspeople being led to various stores that have now turned into dorms and health units. You're left in a sports store with a bunch of other people. Your sister has also been able to bunk with you, and to your luck, you see the professor helping out some people. But shortly after that, a loud explosion blasts through the mall and shatters glass screens. Everyone ducks for cover. You see people running outside. You head out and see a large metallic object lying in front of the mall entrance. There are people crowding the entire area, so it's not easy to see what all the fuss is about. But after getting a closer look, you find out it's a satellite fallen from orbit. It crashed in the front yard and made the boom. There were also reports of other satellites crashing on Earth in the most random places. That means all communication has been wiped out of the map. You run back inside the mall to await what happens next. You look at your sister in fear, not knowing that the new ice age has just begun. One year later, you're relaxing in your bunker when your sister barges in, freaking out. The rings are still there, but it's something else now. You run outside and see everyone gathering around and looking at the sky. Within a year, temperatures have dropped to freeze the entirety of the Earth's surface. Deserts and tropical jungles have turned into icy wastelands. More than half of the wildlife went extinct, and trees are as rare as a four-leaf clover, which means oxygen levels have dropped significantly. Most of the population, or what's remaining of it, live with oxygen tanks, with scientists still trying to crack the case of the rings. Exactly what the professor predicted. But up in the sky, rocks seem to be falling down and crashing all over. It starts off far away, but then the rocks begin to fall down close by. You and everyone else run back into them all, which has been covered with a layer of metal to keep the warmth inside. It should be pretty safe in there. If the rocks are falling down, that means the rings are dissipating. Suddenly, you're full of hope that the ice age might be over soon.